Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day. Today I want to give you an update on the real estate crisis that is currently unfolding in China, as well as an update on one of the main players, which is Country Garden. As you've probably seen in previous videos of mine, we've talked about Country Garden and how it was at risk for a possible default after its grace period, which ended on September 5th. Now, Country Garden did manage to avoid this default, and it managed to pay on its bond payment of $22 million. So in the interim, we can take a sigh of relief. Why? Well, if you're in the West, you might be saying, why does this matter to me? It doesn't matter at all. Well, in a sense, it doesn't matter to you directly because you don't own real estate in China, but it matters to you because you are a participant in the global economy. And China is the second largest economy in the world, and it has a lot of implications into the global economy. On top of that, we have to understand that there are real people who are suffering in China right now because of companies like Country Garden who have built and built and built a ton of apartments, have potentially not even finished some of them. These people have then pre-purchased, which is allowed in China, have pre-purchased some of these apartments and are paying a mortgage on something that was never complete. And because of Country Garden's financial situation, there are real people who are suffering currently. So it is an important issue to take notice of, and it is also an important issue because it has implications for the rest of the economy. So what happens now? Now that Country Garden managed to avoid a default on September 5th? Well, while we can breathe a sigh of relief for the meantime, we have to understand a couple things. One, Country Garden has close to $15 billion of debt that is due within the next 365 days, within the next year. Now, it has a little over $13 billion in cash. So there is already about a $1 billion difference between those two. On top of that, we have to understand that if Country Garden had issues paying a $22 million bond payment and it barely managed to avoid default, that is not a good sign. On top of that, September 17th is around the corner. And September 17th, Country Garden has a $15 million coupon due. Okay, 10 days later, on September 27th, Country Garden has a $40 million coupon payment due. We will have to see if they are able to pay that. Both of these bond payments have a 30-day grace period, just like the one that ended on September 5th. Here's my thing. A company with $200 billion plus of debt, a company that is China's largest real estate developer, should not have issue paying a relatively small bond payment of $22 million, of $15 million, and of $40 million. All right. The difference in how large the company is and these amounts, which may sound large to you or I, should not be a problem for a company that large. It's like you or I having a $1 or $2 or $10 payment due and not being able to pay that. So if there is a liquidity issue that is that bad and they barely narrowly escaped this first round of potential default, we have to wait and see what will happen on September 17th and on September 27th. We'll have to wait and see if they pay it up front or if they use their 30-day grace period to potentially restructure their debt. The fact of the matter is Country Garden is in trouble, and I do see an inevitable default at some point in the future unless there is a liquidity intervention of some sort, whether that comes from creditors, whether that comes from the Chinese government. If they do not have a liquidity, if they don't have help with their liquidity issues, they're on the path towards default, just like Evergrande. So we have to monitor this situation, mostly because of the implications for the global economy, as well as the implications locally. The implications locally are they owe a lot of apartments to a lot of people, and those people are paying mortgages on apartments that are not even complete yet. On top of that, they have overbuilt, and China is experiencing the complete opposite that we are experiencing here in the United States, which is deflation in the real estate market, which is almost worse than major inflation in the real estate market. It is worse, really. On top of that, you have to understand that the people who lend to real estate developers, the firms, the banks, the shadow banks that lend to real estate developers, also lend to other sectors of the Chinese economy. China is known for production of goods, labor, basically production of goods, labor market, and exports, right? Those firms that deal with that part of the economy, they get their funding from the same place that real estate developers get their funding. So if real estate developers stop paying back their loans, that can cascade into the other areas of the market by causing liquidity issues and funding issues for other ventures in the economy. You also have to understand that 30% of Chinese GDP, that means basically 1 in 3 of their GDP dollars, comes from the real estate sector. So when you have problems there, you're going to have problems elsewhere. I don't want to make this video too long. I have a much longer, much more in-depth video explaining what happens if Country Garden defaults. I will link that in the description below, or you can find it on my page. It is just a few videos ago, and that explains in much more detail what happens if Country Garden ends up defaulting. I just wanted to give you an update and keep you abreast of what's going on abroad, because what happens in China affects the rest of the world, just like what happens in the United States affects the rest of the world. They are major economies, and they're the two major sources of economic growth. So we have to talk about them. We have to be aware of what's going on, even though they might not directly affect you or I, because you or I do not own real estate in China. We might still feel the effects because of cascading and what's known as contagion. When something happens in this part of the economy, it affects other parts of the economy. And if that economy is a global economy, it can cascade to the rest of the global economy. So that was a quick update. As always, my name is Derek. I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. I love this stuff. I love personal finance. I love world economics, both macro and micro. And I love giving you my perspective, whether you agree with it or not. I'm not God. I don't have a magic 8-ball, and I don't have a fucking chip on my shoulder. So if you don't agree with me, totally fine. I love to have healthy discussions. As long as they're healthy discussions, I love to have discussions in the comments, as well as my Instagram, which I'm very active on. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so so you don't miss the next video. And please consider turning on the bell notification so you don't miss the videos that we release, usually on Tuesdays, but sometimes if there is major economic news, I'll release a video on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, depending on what needs to be covered. Again, I love this stuff. It's been my passion for over a decade. I love being able to share it with you guys. And again, I don't want to drag this video out too long. If you want more information on what's going on with Country Garden, I'll link the video in the description below. It's a very in-depth video, and it explains the repercussions of what happens if Country Garden eventually does default and potentially follows in the footsteps of Evergrande and goes into bankruptcy. I'll link that video below. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. I love you guys. Stay safe, stay smart, keep learning about personal finance, because it is the cornerstone to your financial future. I'll see you in the next one.